Hello everyone, I am Navzi Shupta from Group 5. We are going to discuss the case study of Eastman Kodak. Established in 1888, it expanded quite quickly and brought revolution in photography. But as of 2004, photographic giant Eastman Kodak is still struggling to come to terms with new world of digital imaging while simultaneously facing increased pressure in its long established photographic business. In the traditional film business, Kodak faces aggressive competition from Fuji and is losing market share. In growing market for digital imaging, Kodak has been making massive investments in technology, new products, marketing, and yet it's just one of the many players seeking to build a strong technological and market position in emerging digital imaging sector. The situation facing Kodak is critical. Having identified Kodak's business as pictures and established the slogan taking pictures further, Kodak has identified its future as the capturing, editing, transmission, and printing of pictures, whether by traditional chemical or electronic means. Its commitment of pictures was underlined by George Fisher's disposal of Kodak's chemical and pharmaceutical business in early 1990s. At the same time, Kodak faces a huge challenge. Can a company that has dominated the world market for chemical based photography for close to a century build the capabilities needed to successful in fast changing world of digital imaging?
I'm Namami and I'll be talking about the Kodak's competencies. So, before its demise, Kodak was the leading innovator and the producer of quality products and photography services. Several competencies are evident from the company's situation at that time. First, the leaders and followers were conversant with the requirements of the industry. So, they were able to produce very high quality photo films and paper that delivered the best experience to its customers. Second, the organization had developed and implemented an effective business model and taglines that appeared to attract more clients. For instance, Kodak's Moment. The concept it encouraged many people to rely on the Kodak's product to keep their memories. These practices it maximized the profits and revenue. Third, a proper culture existed to encourage all the workers to engage in research and development and produce superior products for different markets. And finally, able leadership of the different managers contributed to the company's success spanning over 100 years. These competencies it explains why Kodak was able to overcome most of the challenges and experience in the industry and transform the overall experience of most of the customers. So now I'm going to talk about the challenges that Kodak faced. As the technology progressed, the use of film and the printing sheets it gradually came to a halt. This was due to the invention of the digital cameras in 1975, and the Kodak it ignored the digital cameras because the business of the film and the paper was very profitable at the time. But this idea was implemented on a very large scale by a Japanese company called Fuji Films, and soon many other companies started the production and the sales of digital cameras and leaving Kodak behind in the race. And this was Kodak's first biggest mistake, the ignorance of new technology and not adapting to the changing market dynamics. It initiated the Kodak's downfall. It completely ignored the feedback of the media and the market. Kodak it tried to convince people that the film cameras were much better than the digital cameras, and it lost 10 valuable years in the process. People also they realized that the digital photography was very ahead of the traditional film photography. It was cheaper than the film photography, and the image was also very better. When the Kodak it finally understood and started the sale and the production of the digital cameras, it was very late. Many big companies had already established themselves in the market by then, and Kodak couldn't keep the pace with the big shots.
Good morning, I'm Muskan from Group 5 and I'm going to speak about Kodak's digital imaging strategy. Under Fisher and Karp, Kodak's digital imaging strategy became much more focused and coherent, where it focused on pictures and didn't want to be tied to any specific imaging technology. Separate strategies were used for professional and consumer markets, where the professional market, where Kodak in professional market pioneered the use of new technologies and used price insensitivity to recoup some of its developmental costs, and in the consumer market, it committed to a hybrid approach offering selective digitization of particular functions. Kodak recognized that it must be selective and in products and activities where it allocates the investment, as the market was dominated by Microsoft in operating systems, HP in inkjet. So it forged alliances with companies engaged in complementary activities, products, and technologies. It positioned itself within certain parts of value chain, but it used its brand and distribution presence, both retail and online, as an umbrella for providing compatible digital imaging systems. Kodak's EasyShare is a very good example. Kodak failed because it focused too closely on its most powerful customers and thus directed strategic investments exclusively to the traditional photography business. It was not the digital imaging that led to Kodak's downfall. Though it was a leader in digital photography at that time, the business was far from realizing any payback because digital imaging had become a commodity and required no special skills for manufacturing.
Digital imaging and the exit from chemicals and pharmaceuticals. After the Second World War, Kodak entered a new growth phase with an expanding business and diversification into healthcare and pharmaceuticals. Kodak also faced major competitive challenges. In cameras, Kodak's leadership was undermined by the rise of Japanese camera industry. In film, Fuji Photo Film Company embarked on a strategy of aggressive international expansion. In addition, new imaging technologies were emerging, which was Polaroid pioneer instant photography. But in 1993, shortly after his arrival at Kodak, former CEO George Fisher committed Kodak to imaging in general and digital imaging in particular through his decision to divest Eastman Chemical and Eastman Pharmaceuticals. Digital imaging, specialty chemicals, and pharmaceuticals are all technology intensive businesses where the trend has been for rapid consolidation to exploit economies of scale and global spread. Kodak was already a small player in chemicals and pharmaceuticals and probably lacked both the financial and managerial resources needed to simultaneously develop its imaging, chemicals, and pharmaceutical business. Kodak doesn't have any background in operating a diversified, multi-divisional corporation in which top corporate management undertakes financial and strategic decisions, leaving the business to be run by divisional managers. It is also possible that there was symbolic value in Signal Kodak's commitment to future and imagining.
Hi, my name is Gaurav Parhar and I would like to present about the Kodak's approaches. So when the new technologies emerged, they posed a threat to Kodak, but the company's top leadership chose to stick with their previous competencies and failed to incorporate new developments into their strategy. When challenges like revenue loss and reduced sales emerged, the relevant leaders failed to implement the most appropriate crisis management strategy. The company failed to introduce the right change at a right time which could help them transform organizational performance. The company relied on its traditional performance to predict how cameras would only be intended to capture images that would have to be printed on its photo paper. Now I would like to talk about the Kodak's failures and what went wrong. So the Kodak failed to give digital cameras the attention they required, which made their failure inevitable. They failed to capitalize on the modern technology because they were unable to understand the patterns recorded in the external environment. They failed to act according to consumer expectations. Another reason was that they focused heavily on the segment of printed images. Also, the competitors such as Fuji, Polaroid, and Xerox emerged and started to give tough competition to Kodak. The fact that Kodak's primary business was film and they did very little to prepare for the disruption that digital technology would have on the industry was another factor that led to their demise.
So Kotak built a very huge infrastructure and distribution facility. However, this needed vertical integration. And in such a case, they did a vertical integration, including supply chain and their raw materials. Apart from that, Kotak heavily invested in R&D, in research and development. It housed its scientists to centralized uh, areas and centers, and it had a huge R&D center and earned 19,576 US patents. However, after this innovation, even after this vertical integration, Kotak failed. Why? Because the management of innovation and driving the alignment and consistency between its business and operations were a failed progress. So there was no focus on innovation. There was uh, the camera, the digital imagery is uh, customer oriented. However, Kotak failed to do their R&D upon what customers need. What they did was they left the scientists, they left the designers, they left the people who were working on R&D to think freely about whatever idea they could, which did not take into consideration what customers needed. And this was the reason for failure.